All right, guys, so we have a major announcement from former President Trump as he announced that he is suing Facebook, Twitter, and Google over alleged censorships, says they've ceased to be private. Now, this is interesting because I've kind of made the same argument to a certain extent about how these companies really aren't private companies in the sense that, one, they're being subsidized by the government, right? And then two, they're being pressured from the government officials to censor and ban speech that basically the Democrat Party does not like. Okay, and that, in my opinion, does kind of make big tech an arm of the government to a certain extent, right? And that's been my biggest pushback to the whole libertarian argument of, well, it's a private company, they can do what they want. And like I said, in the ideal world, I definitely would say, hey, I hope that that's how it is, right? I would hope that private companies are making decisions independent of what the government is telling them to do, and that the money that the government is giving them. But that's not the reality of the world that we live in, okay? And Trump is kind of making the same arguments here with this lawsuit that he is filing. So let's read a little bit more here about what's going on and go from there. Former President Donald Trump on Wednesday announced that he will lead a lawsuit over alleged censorship against Twitter, Facebook, and Google, three tech companies that removed him from their platforms after the January 6th attack on the Capitol by a mob of his supporters. The lawsuit will be a class action with Trump as the lead plaintiff, claiming he's been censored by the companies. He spoke about the legal action from his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. Quote, I stand before you this morning to announce a very important development of our freedom and freedom of speech, Trump said. In conjunction with the America First Policy Institute, I'm filing as the lead action representative a major class action lawsuit against the big tech giants, including Facebook, Google, and Twitter, as well as their CEOs. There is no better evidence that big tech is out of control than the fact they have banned the sitting president of the United States earlier this year, Trump added. If they can do that to me, they can do that to anyone. Now, I think that this is a very strong statement from President Trump, because I think a lot of people that are pro-censorship don't realize just how big of an issue that actually is, right? If a tech company can ban a sitting president, right, then they can ban anybody. And because these companies are so big, guys, I look at the practical reality of things, right? I'm looking at the practical reality. A lot of these companies like Twitter, they're basically public forums, right? They're public forums. Okay, so if you're banning the sitting president from these platforms, then effectively you can ban him and his message from reaching the world. Now, regardless of whether or not you like the president or not, or you like the things he says, that shouldn't be up to big tech to decide. That should be up to the people to decide. Because practically speaking, they are public forums. Now, if the people don't agree with the president's message, then that will show. But if people agree with it, then they just agree with it. That's just something that you have to deal with. But that's something that a lot of people don't understand. It's like, if they can do it to him, then they will do it to you, right? They will do it to people on the left as well, right? If you happen to go outside of the mainstream narrative or the narrative that they consider to be acceptable. And a lot of people don't think about that. Okay. And like I said, Trump's making an excellent point here. You know, that's really dangerous when, again, the leader of the free world, whether you like him or not, can be banned from these major platforms that, again, are effectively, right? I'm not saying legally, I'm saying effectively public forums. Okay. I just have an issue with that. We live in the 21st century. These tech companies are giants. They effectively run the world, them and their employees, right? That's just what it is. Okay. Quote, after close review of recent tweets from the real Donald Trump account and the context around them, specifically how they are received and interpreted on and off Twitter, we have permanently suspended the account due to the risk of further incitement of violence, Twitter wrote in a blog post about its decision. But Republicans and Trump himself have maintained that these companies are unfairly censoring conservatives, pointing to international dictators who can still post on Twitter. Trump said the lawsuit will be filed in the Southern District of Florida, seeking injunction relief against shameful censorship of the American people. Okay, so it's not just about Trump, right? It's also about other things like, when it comes to talking about the virus, or when it comes to talking about certain topics that really are kind of off limits, right? And these topics, some of them, the science evolves, right? And as the science is evolving, it comes to bear that some of the things that people were saying in the past, some of the things that they got banned for, has come true, right? Or put it this way, it is the leading theory now. And I think that some of this banning really is anti-science, even though they say it's in the name of, science and trying to prevent misinformation. It's really just creating more misinformation, because again, the mainstream narrative is not 100% correct. It's not always right. And again, that's my problem with people that are pro-censorship. They just assume the mainstream narrative is always correct. The mainstream narrative is free to be wrong and to change because it's the mainstream narrative. But the alternative narrative that may be correct from the get-go, that's not allowed because, at the time, it may have been conspiratorial. And again, that to me presents a big issue in regards to not only just, freedom of speech in this country, but also just purely democracy. Okay, if only certain ideas are allowed to be heard. Quote, while the social media companies are officially private entities, in recent years, they have ceased to be private with the enactment of their historical use of Section 230, which profoundly protects them from liability. Trump said it is in effect a massive government subsidy. These companies have been co-opted, coerced, and weaponized by government actors to become the enforcers of illegal constitutional censorship. Exactly. Right? Ding, ding, ding. Exactly the arguments that I've been making. Right? You guys can look at the congressional hearings between some of these big tech CEOs and these Democrat congressmen. I mean, they're literally saying, like, why are you not censoring this type of information more? Information that we don't like. Why are you not censoring this more? It's incumbent on you to censor, right? And guys, in my heart of hearts, I don't believe these companies want to do it, right? Because they're profit driven. Okay, they would rather have as many viewers and people on a platform as possible to run ads. In their perfect world, there would probably be no censorship. However, they're being pressured to do it by their employees and by Democrat actors in Congress. Matter of fact, I mean, there was a story that came out about how the Biden administration was pressuring Facebook to censor Trump in the middle of the election. In the middle of election season, they was like, oh, how are you letting Trump say X, Y, and Z, make these claims? You should censor him. I mean, it's stuff like that was like, people don't think it's a big deal, but it is a big deal. Because they're essentially trying to guilt trip these companies into censorship, right? Banning speech that they don't like, okay? And again, my argument is that it should be up to the American people to decide what they want to believe is true and what they don't want to believe is true. If most people are led to believe something that's untrue, oh well, that is a consequence of free speech, right? Free speech comes with consequences, right? But I would much rather have it than have the alternative, which is basically like China, right? Where there's effectively no free speech. This shouldn't be hard for people to understand here. Shanna Wiseman of the Libertarian Art Street Institute, which supports a robust reading of Section 230 to provide broad protections to tech companies, pushed back on Trump's comments. Wiseman said that the idea that tech companies benefiting from law prevents them from being private is asinine. I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with that at all, because the thing is that they're not just benefiting from the law. They're taking advantage of the fact that they're trying to be platforms and publishers at the same time, right? The fact that they get protections being a platform means that, okay, listen, you don't have to take the responsibility of being a publisher. So they should just remain a platform, because they're not going to get sued for what people post. So they don't need to go out of their way to try to censor certain content, right? Now, again, I think there is some things that's like direct threats of violence, things like that. Yeah, I think that there's a argument that, okay, yes, you probably should have some censorship of that. But when it comes to people having their own theories about X, Y, and Z, why is it up to why should big companies be censoring that stuff? Right? It's your platform. You don't have to take responsibility for people believing that. Why would you take responsibility? You're not publishing it. You're not a publisher. And it's not like people are going to leave the platform. People are not going to leave the platform. People own the platform because the user experience on the platform is good, right? People own the platform because that type of content was on the platform in the first place. That's why people came to YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. And I think in the long run, these companies are really getting rid of what made them great in the first place. What made YouTube great is that you could go on YouTube and get into the rabbit hole, right? The deep conspiracy. It was all about the content creator. The creator was put first. But now that the advertisers have been put first and the woke revolutionaries have been put first, things are starting to change. I don't necessarily think that's good in the long term. I don't think that that's what made the platforms great in the first place. I really don't. But like I said, they're not just benefiting from the law. They're also benefiting from subsidies. And that's what people don't realize. These companies are being subsidized by the federal government. We have corporate socialism going on here. Government cannot wave a wand and say you're public now. She added the idea that this is a subsidy is nowhere near the truth. And finally, government pressuring companies or companies taking cues from government entities does not magically turn them into government actors. Okay, all right, you can say that, but I would argue that you're not living in the practical reality, right? One, they are receiving subsidies. Whether or not you want to call that law a subsidy, that's up to you. That's a language game. But matter of fact, I mean, they received over $9 billion in subsidies over 5 years. Okay, back in 2018. So you can't sit here and try to tell me that a company that is essentially taking marching orders from the Democrat Party, in bed with the Democrat Party, and receiving subsidies from the federal government, that they're not influenced by the government to a certain extent. Like, they're not being used effectively as government actors. I mean, come on. That's an argument that's not grounded in practicality to me. The Trump lawsuit is going to be led by the America First Policy Institute, a nonprofit run by several allies and alumni from the Trump Institution. AFPI President and CEO Brooke Rollins introduced Trump before the remarks Wednesday. Quote, "It's no surprise that they want the First Amendment gone," Rollins said of progressives and elites. They don't advocate for abolition, but they do advocate for curtailing it into meaninglessness. Nowhere is it more evident than in the suppression of First Amendment rights online, she continued. AFPI Pam Boddy, meanwhile, said the lawsuit isn't just for conservatives who believe they've been wrong, but also to protect others. This isn't just for conservatives. This is for our media. This is for Democrats and even progressives whose speech should be protected under the First Amendment. She said, "Do you remember that Tulsi Gabbard was censored when she was running for president?" Yeah, I mean, that to me, again, people don't understand that the world is evolving. Okay, and as the world evolves, you got to recognize that, okay, what the First Amendment means probably evolves as well. Okay, and I'm kind of making a living constitutionalist argument here, right? But it is what it is. It fits what I'm saying right now. That because of that, right, like you have to understand that these companies have become so big, right, that they have monopoly power, that they can buy out their competition, right? So if anybody comes close to taking down Facebook or Twitter, you just buy them, right? And because of that, and because, again, they've effectively become public forums, they may be too big to fail, right? They may have become so big that they may need to be reined in to a certain extent in terms of censorship, because they now have the power to regulate who's allowed to speak and who's not, what views are being shown, what ideas are being perpetuated, and what ideas are not, right? They have the power to do that. In my opinion, that's very, very dangerous to have that power in the power of, just a company, right? And again, in my ideal world, I wouldn't want them to censor anybody, right? I want the censorship to be truly extreme things, and that's it. For example, like threats of violence. That's it. Other than that, I would basically want a space in which, people can speak. But, moving forward here, what will come out of this? I don't know. A lot of people are saying that this is just, a fundraising thing. I don't know if it's a fundraising thing or not. I mean, obviously they're going to try to raise money to pursue this. But I do think that the principle of it is correct, right? Whether or not it actually goes anywhere, I don't know. I think that the principle is correct, right? Like there is something to be said about censoring a sitting president, even if you don't agree with him, even if you have issues with things he says. Like, again, you have to let the American people decide, right? They have to be the ones to make the choice of whether or not they want to follow somebody or whether or not they don't, right? That's up to the people. It's not up to these companies to decide. And ultimately, I really don't think that they're helping out with what they claim they're trying to prevent, which is extremism and violence. I think they're actually creating more of that, or the potential for more of that, because you are pushing certain people to parts of the internet that are echo chambers, and they're only going to hear one narrative. They're only going to hear one side of the story, and that, in my opinion, creates more extremism. And I've argued that so much about censorship. In my opinion, I think censorship leads to more extremism, right? I think you got to put ideas out there in the open, let people debate the ideas, and whatever ideas survive, those are the ones that survive. The ones that don't, they don't. Even if it's not correct, right? Even if it's untrue. That is just a consequence of free speech. But again, I would much rather live in a world like that than live in a world where we don't have that at all, where it's just controlled by one actor. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.